Well, good evening and welcome back to Wednesday Night Live, coming to you from Pocatello, Idaho, in the beautiful Port Neuf Valley, great gateway to the great Northwest. We have a lot to cover tonight, current events, of course, and most of this will be specific to Pocatello, so those of you who watch outside the state, hopefully you'll find it interesting and informative, but try not to fall asleep with Pocatello politics. They can get pretty lively around here. Before we go into that, let me remind you, as I do every week at this time, about Compassion and Hope Pregnancy Center. These folks, as I say many times, are doing God's work. They are the antithesis, the absolute opposite, 180 degrees from Planned Parenthood, whose plan for parenthood seems to be no parenthood. Compassion and Hope is there for you. If you are a young mother, perhaps you were not expecting to get pregnant, perhaps you're pregnant out of wedlock, or perhaps you're impoverished. There are any number of reasons why you may want to go to Compassion and Hope Pregnancy Center. But believe me, they're there for you. And they are there for the life of your yet born or maybe already born child. So for those of you who are outside of the state of Idaho has one area code, 208. The number for Compassion and Hope Pregnancy Center is 478-HOPE. A very fitting number, 478-HOPE. Why don't you give them a call, see what you can do to help them save a life, save the life of a child, of a mother, maybe of a family. And then God will bless you accordingly. Well, I'd like to also tell you about, and it's very short notice, if you didn't already know about it, I'm sorry that I couldn't get this information to you sooner, but next week will be I think it's the third annual Constitution Day Camp. And this is a day camp that the kids go to, well, it's on one week a year. And this year, it'll be from July 7th through the 11th. So Monday will be the first day of camp. This is at the Dale Kirkham Memorial Building. Now that's down by, if you're going south on, 5 toward the high school, it would be on the east side of the highway. And it's a big red barn-like building that sits back from the road. Beautiful, beautiful area there, beautiful building. Great place to have public events of any kind. In this case, it's going to be for the Constitution Day Camp. This is for children ages 7 through 14, and they will learn about the Constitution of the United States, our founding fathers, and the struggles that our nation had to become a nation. Now, if your child is, and this is from 8:30 in the morning till noon, Monday through Friday. Now, Friday, the children put on their own musical play, and the kids have a ball with it, and I think you'll have a lot of fun with it too. And moms, if you need the morning off and you can't take a vacation right away, this is a good way for your child to be very actively engaged in something productive while you may be taking a morning off to maybe get a couple extra winks or whatever. 8:30 to 12, Monday through Friday at Marydale Park. That's 5700 South, or 5700 block of South 5th. And it's only $15 for the entire week per child. With $3 a day, children get a snack, and they will get a great education in the Constitution and the founding of our nation. And you will like it. I wish I could give you a close-up of this picture. There's a picture of just a few of one class and their staff with the American flag. The kids really have a ball, and they love the musical, and I think you will too. Now, you should write this down if you don't already know the number. Call Lorraine Oram at 244-2906. Lorraine Oram at 244-2906. This camp always fills up early, and even though I'm giving you a late heads up on it, you may have room. I can't promise that. There may be room for you to get your children in there. Believe me, you'll be glad, and they'll be glad that you did. So once again, Lorraine Oram at 244-2906. All right, we've got a number of things to cover tonight, and I think we'll start. With the recount. And by this time, this is old news, but it might be of some value to you if you understood a little bit more of how we came to where we are with the recount. So before we do that, let's review a news article that was on television about a week ago, where the deputy city or county prosecutor was interviewed regarding the recount. Kathy, can we run that one now?
The Yes Pocatello organization is suing Bannock County. The suit names the Bannock County clerk and more than 100 employees of Bannock County and election volunteers. The suit claims fraud and corruption after one of the founders of Yes Pocatello, Ralph Lillig, says the county refused to give him public records. The county fired back today, saying these accusations are completely unfounded.
My county personnel, especially my elections officials, have worked extra hard to their exhaustion, and it's sad to see them criticized for all that hard work.
Service says Lillig and Yes Pocatello have never been denied any public records. He says they met with Yes Pocatello and the elections office June 2nd. They discussed when the county could give Lillig the numerous records he requested. Service says these things just take time. He says now that the lawsuit has been filed, they cannot release any records. Service says Yes Pocatello is saying anything it can to get its way.
It boils down to the government is conspiring against the people kind of argument, and it ranks up there with UFOs.
Service and the county have 20 days to respond to the lawsuit. We did make an attempt to reach Ralph Lillig for comment. We did not receive any call back. We go to weather now.
All right, so there you see the astonishing professionalism of the deputy prosecutor Ian Service as he talks about us seeing conspiracies and putting us up there with UFOs. Very, very professional, Mr. Service. I can see why you're a deputy prosecutor. Now let me explain to you folks who may not know how the somewhat tangled inner workings of the county work, so that you'll understand a little bit better that his remarks may have been a little bit less than thoughtful. First of all, the elections office are the people responsible for doing the recount. They work every day, and whether they're exhausted at the end of the day is not for me to say, nor is it for Mr. Service to say. I know that it sounds good for him to pat him on the back and make them feel good about themselves, and he can feel good about himself for patronizing them, but they're paid to work every day. And let me assure you also that this recount was not a free ride. The Vote Yes Pocatello folks had to come up with $3,900 to pay for that. The folks in the elections office are already at work. This is perhaps an extra duty, and $3,900, I don't know if it covers the whole 5 hours that it took to do the recount, but it seems like it might have covered a substantial portion of that. Now let me give you a little idea of how this works. Mr. Service stated that we met June 2nd, and that's true. Vote Yes Pocatello had asked to speak with Mr. Pilecki. Since he is the county clerk and he's in charge of elections, we had asked to speak with him. When one of the other committee members and I got there, we were met not only by Mr. Pilecki, but by a number of other people, including Julie Hancock, who's in charge of the elections, and of course she would have to be there, and her assistant was there. Mr. Pilecki's, I guess her title would be administrative assistant, I'm not really sure, was there, and James Ruckty from Fair Pocatello came in. Now let me remind you, or tell you again if I didn't already, that we had asked for a meeting with Mr. Pilecki. And the reason for the meeting was to find out what information was available and how we would go about obtaining it. So really, Mr. Ruckty had no business being there, although he inserted himself into this meeting. And after he called me a few choice names in front of the other people there, he put himself at the table and told me he wasn't leaving and I couldn't make him. Well, that's true, I couldn't. But this was not a public hearing as it was characterized by Mr. Service later in the meeting, and Mr. Service came in. Now, I can just surmise why he was there, even though our meeting was supposed to be with Mr. Pilecki, and we had asked to speak to him. And I have to tell you that we expected that we were basically meeting in a confidential situation with the elections office and with the county clerk. So when the deputy prosecutor came in, that added a new and unexpected dimension. There was no reason for him to be there. It turned out it was useful to some extent. But it was interesting that we later learned, and it was brought to Mr. Service's attention during that meeting, that all of our communications from Vote Yes Pocatello to Mr. Pilecki's office was being courtesy copied to Fair Pocatello. We thought this was confidential communication. We thought this was privileged communication. So imagine our surprise to find Mr. Ruckty in the office there continuing with this insertion into what we thought was a privileged communication situation. I'm not an attorney. I use that term because that's the way I understand it's characterized. Mr. Ruckte is an attorney, and he certainly knows about privileged communication, as does Mr. Service. However, we also learned at a later date that our what we thought was privileged communication was also going to a very large organization, Hilltop. I've got the information here. It is a Hilltop Public Solutions. Maria Wieg is the local coordinator, or whatever her job is with that. They are one of these organizations that molds public opinion. They get information about voting patterns and so on. We were puzzled as to why Mr. Ruckte and Fair Pocatello would be CC'd automatically. I understand that they requested that. Why that request was granted, we don't know. But imagine yourself if you were going to be playing the Dodgers and you had a lineup that you were looking at putting forth, and you gave your lineup and all the information to the other side. Wouldn't be a very, very productive game for you opposing the Dodgers. And that's rather the way that I looked at it as far as Mr. Ruckte being there. Now, when he was introduced, when I introduced him to a caller, we had a friend of ours from Vote Yes Pocatello, an attorney who had agreed to sit in on a conference call that day when he called, and I thought it best to introduce those at the table so he wouldn't be ambushed and he would know who he was speaking to since he was on the phone. And by the way, this Matt Williams is a prosecutor with 20 years experience, so he didn't just fall off the potato wagon. I introduced Mr. Ruckte as the attorney for Fair Pocatello. He very quickly told me, I'm not here as the attorney, I am here as co-chair. And I accept that as it was. Nonetheless, he is still an attorney. That being said, we did go through about an hour's worth, maybe a little more time, going through the procedures on how to go about getting the information. We, Vote Yes Pocatello, turned in a list of about 14 or 15 various items that we wanted to look at to see where we may decide on a plan of action. Since we had to pay for the recount, we wanted to see where we would best be able to spend our dollars. We asked for about 14 or 15 different things, not the least of which was to recount all 39 precincts that were covered. But there were a number of other sources of information that were very critical for us to make a decision, which were not available and have yet to be made available to us. We never got those pieces of information, and I'm quite certain had we been able to use those, we would have had a different ending to the recount. That being said, and I need to clarify the statement that was made on Channel 3 about my suing the county. I have sued no one. I filed a contest. A contest is another way of very loosely framing it, and here again, I'm not a lawyer. Most of you watching are not, so I'm trying to put this in words that we can all relate to. Most of us know what a Freedom of Information Act is, FOIA as it's called. When we were not getting anywhere with our request with the county clerk's office, and we were meeting one obstacle after another to get information that Vote Yes Pocatello felt was critical to our determining where we were going to look, since we had very little money and very little space to look. We were obfuscated, we were impeded. There was a lot that we still haven't got that we felt was very important. I filed a contest. A contest is not a lawsuit, and the information included in the contest named Mr. Pilecki. This is not a personal suit against Mr. Pilecki, but Mr. Pilecki is the county clerk. He is the person ultimately responsible, and this contest was filed in the 6th District Court, and of course it goes through Mr. Pilecki, and it named 100 Jane and John Does. The reason for that is we don't know who the people are that are dealing with this, so we have to leave this in a very loose framework until it goes further. This is not a lawsuit, even though the language in it, as I told you last week, is rather arcane. It comes right out of the code, and one of the words used in the code is fraud. And if you were reading that prima facie and you weren't really studying it, it may look to the average person as if we are accusing somebody of fraud. We are not. We've never accused anybody of fraud or malfeasance or anything else. What we're saying, and this is putting it in a very loose nutshell, the contest is saying, Your Honor, we're not getting the information we need to make our case, and we are asking you to order Mr. Pilecki's people to give us the information we've asked for. That's what it amounts to. That's what a contest basically amounts to. Now, I'm sure that an attorney could put that in words that would make it sound really bombastic and really bad, but basically the contest amounts to another way of saying a FOIA. We're telling the judge, we're getting stonewalled here and we really need your help, and would you please tell these people to give us the information that we as citizens have a right to have. The fact that we're going there as a committee does not change the fact that we are citizens. Vote Yes Pocatello are just plain ordinary everyday citizens like you folks watching this program, at least most of you. I realize there are some other people watching this with a different agenda. We're just regular folks. The reason we even got into this mess in the first place is because we, as regular folks, felt that this so-called non-discrimination ordinance, regardless of what was behind it, that was not the case, and it still is not the case. We felt that it is bad law. Simple, very, very simple. The fact that it has come in from the LGBTQ community does not change the fact that it is, in my opinion, and that of about 4,000 other people, that this is bad law. Well, more than 4,000. There were 10,200 people cast ballots. And when it got down to it, we had the recount this last Friday, and it took about 5 hours, roughly 5, maybe 6 hours to complete the recount. And we were required to use the same machines as were used on the night of the election, the same ballots as were used on the night of the election, basically the same procedures as were used on the night of the election, which is, you know, it's kind of like looking at garbage in, garbage out. But we were very restricted on what we could do. Even though we had asked for random sampling and we wanted a random hand counting, even the hand count that we were given was restricted to what they allowed us to hand count. There were an awful lot of things we wanted to look at that we have still not seen. As it was, you may recall on election night, pardon me, after the ballots were initially counted, there was a difference in favor of Fair Pocatello of 147 votes. By 2 or 3 o'clock the next morning, that had been reduced to 80 votes. That should set off a few alarms if there was that much of a reduction. As of the recount the other day, that reduction was down to 56 votes. So, Fair Pocatello, who spent $150,000. You remember when this first started, they had the very first Sunshine report I showed you showed about $65,000 that had been spent by Fair Pocatello. And I told you I thought it would probably go as high as $85,000. It went to $150,000. That's a huge amount of money for this conglomeration of groups, big groups, large groups, to spend to acquire 56 votes. And I am not convinced that those 56 votes could not be eliminated if we had all the information we need. That being said, we don't have another recount. So I think that it's indicative, though, if you look at the original 147 votes down to 56, that's about a 63 or 64% difference. There's a very serious problem in the system here, folks. There's a very serious problem in the county clerk's office, the elections office, and, well, whoever's involved in this. A serious enough problem that you, as well as I, should be very concerned about what's going on in the elections office. Now, I am not pointing fingers at Julie Hancock or her assistant. I'm not pointing fingers at Mr. Pilecki or anybody else. What I'm saying is that there is a problem in the elections office. There is a problem with the process. There's a problem with the way the votes are garnered and the way they are counted. So much so that between election night and last Friday, we were able to show something like a 63 or 64% difference in finding other ballots that were no longer valid ballots, if you will. We should all be concerned. And this is not the first time this has happened. This is the first time that anybody has stood up on their hind legs and had the guts to call for a recount. Believe me, it was not what I wanted to do. I would much rather have said, we're all done. But a number of people came to me and said, you know, it dropped from 147 to 80. There's something wrong. And we were able to raise enough money to go forward with it. And indeed, there is something wrong. We don't know what it is. We will perhaps find out later. So I think you had a right to understand. Now, let me explain also how this worked. When we had the meeting with Mr. Service, he and Mr. Ruckty both, well, first, Mr. Ruckty objected to the fact that we were doing a recording of the meeting. Mr. Ruckty said he didn't want to be recorded. Well, folks, this is a one-party state. And in a one-party state, that means anybody can be the party to the recording and authorize that recording. As it was my associate in Fair Pocatello who made the recording. Mr. Ruckey had to have this explained to him by Mr. Williams, as did Mr. Service, because apparently they don't understand, or didn't at that time, or maybe they would like us to believe they didn't understand, or maybe they thought we could be easily bullied, because there has been what I would consider some real bullying tactics used here. But it was pointed out to them by Mr. Williams, who is an attorney with 20 years prosecutorial experience, that it is a one-party state and we had every right to record the meeting. So we did record the meeting. That being said, with 3 days, now the recount, the period we have in which to find information that we feel is germane toward the recount, we have 20 calendar days. That means weekends and holidays don't count. So really, instead of 20 days, you have, what, about 2.5 working weeks? It's not much time, especially when you're being one impediment after another is put in front of you. 3 days, when we had 3 days left on a Thursday, we were informed by the prosecutor's office, and I'll put this in just paraphrasing it, oops, our bad, we're not the ones that do this. You need to go to the Attorney General's office. Imagine our astonishment when we had been given instructions by the county prosecutor's office. We were told this is the way it's to proceed. We proceeded according to the instructions we were given by the expert in the county's law in this area, so we're told. We followed those instructions, and then with 3 working days left, on a Thursday afternoon, we received information or Thursday morning, we received information, oops, we weren't really supposed to do that, too bad. Now, they didn't put it that way, I'm paraphrasing it, but it was too bad for us, because now we had to go down and get the $3,900 back from the county, issue a check to the Attorney General's office, overnight that with a request to the Attorney General's office, which we did do that. We sent it to them. Friday morning, they acknowledged receipt of it. Later that day, we were told, wait a minute, this isn't our job. This is the county's job. Imagine our concern there. This was Friday. We had until Monday to get this straightened out. This was based on the information we were given first by the county prosecutor's office. We contacted the Attorney General's office, and they said, no, the county does the counting, but we're going to keep the money because we're going to supervise it. And indeed, that's the way it happened, the way it worked out. So then the Attorney General's office sent a representative to us. He gave us a piece of paper, which were basically the marching orders on how this was going to be done, how the count would proceed. And he told us, among other things, that the law had been changed in 2011, and basically we were breaking new ground, that they really weren't sure how this was supposed to go. So these instructions were new, untested. Well, that was not the most the most exciting news. Well, it was exciting, but it wasn't the best news we'd had, because now we realized that once again this was going to be open to a whole lot of interpretation, and well, things can change. As it was, the Secretary of State's office sent down a representative who watched the proceedings, and we went through the count. There were probably maybe 8 to 10 people in the gallery on either side of the aisle. On the gallery for the Fair Pocatello people, there were probably 8 or 10 people that were there, some coming and going, some who stayed through most of the procedure. On the other gallery where I was sitting, there were maybe 2 or 3 people, not a big turnout. It was interesting to see who stopped by to visit the Fair Pocatello gallery. Mr. Service stopped by to visit. Spent no time saying hi to me or to Tom Castellamides, who was representing us in the counting area, but he did spend some time sitting and shooting a breeze with the people from Fair Pocatello. Now, I will tell you something that I learned as a police officer going through the academy many years ago. They were talking about officers taking free meals. In Los Angeles and many big cities, there are places that would give meals for free to police officers who show up there, and many officers would take them. I will tell you I would not, and that's not because I'm an angel or a saint. That was just my personal way of looking at it. I felt if I couldn't afford it out of the paycheck I was getting, I shouldn't be eating it. And besides, I didn't eat out often. My wife fixed very good meals for me, and I didn't have to worry about what might be in it when I went to the restaurant. But the one thing that I remember to this day when they taught us in the academy was that officer may be in there having his meal, and he may be getting it for free, although his presence perhaps is going to deter crime, so maybe there's a quid pro quo there. But it's not necessarily the evil, it's the appearance of evil. Now think about that for a moment. It's the appearance of evil. When I saw the people that were stopping to chit-chat with the people in the Fair Pocatello Gallery, I have to tell you that there was a certain supposition that I could draw personally. Didn't mean it was right or wrong, but it was interesting to me to see that there were a number of high-powered attorneys that showed up to view the proceedings, as well as the deputy prosecutor for the city, or the county rather, who spent a little time chit-chatting with folks on the Fair Pocatello side. None of those folks said anything to us, which is okay with me. But here again, it's not the evil, it's the perception of evil. And I use evil just because that's the term I was taught. Doesn't mean it was evil at all. Well, anyway, as the final result was that the breakdown now has dropped from 147 to 56. And again, I tell you, I hope you understand that you should be very concerned when our elections office and our county clerk are having these types of, and this happens over and over. This is nothing new. 4 years ago, there was another, the integrity community for the Republican Party had some people in there. I happened to be one of those. And there were some problems with the machines where they fed in machine papers on one side and on the other side. They got perfect ballot counts. When we mixed them up, it came back a little different. When we mixed them up, they came back all Republicans won, and they came back all Democrats won. There was a problem with the machines. That was 4 years ago. It's even more so now, but nobody called for a recount that time. This is a little different. Has that put a target on me? Absolutely. My telling you about what happened in the meeting with the prosecutor's office probably has a new target on me. I suspect, very interesting. I went out to get my driver's license renewed recently. Did you know that you now have to show your birth certificate if you want to get a driver's license? That's true. I am born and raised in this country, spent 15 years in all 4 branches of the service, retired police officer, 71 years old. I had to show my birth certificate. Didn't have to show it last time I got a driver's license, but this time I did. Do you think I was a little surprised? Yeah. Today I took my wife down for her driver's license. She didn't have to show a birth certificate. I've spoken to several people now and told them of my surprise at having to produce a birth certificate. Nobody else that I've spoken to has either. Coincidence? Perhaps. But you may want to be prepared if you're going down to get your driver's license. If you got your last one before 2008, when the law supposedly changed, where now you're supposedly required to produce proof of citizenship. And my last driver's license from this state apparently wasn't proof enough. But you may want to be prepared if you're going down for your driver's license. Have your birth certificate available. They may just ask for it. Well, let's move on to let's go on to a little bit more. So now we've covered the recount. We've covered what happened there. We're not. I'm not pleased with this. I wish there had been a different result. I have to tell you, there was quite a cheer went up from the people at the Fair Pocatello Gallery when the count came back, and Mr. Ruckty turned to his audience and announced to them, "We win again," and they cheered again. And so it's good for nice to have fun and have your party again, as they did the first time. I should think that spending $150,000 would get better results than that. Let's see, that came out to over $30 per. If you take that each side had, about 4,800 or 4,900 votes, and with 56 vote margin, that's about $33 a vote. And if you just look at the 56 that remained, that's about $281 per vote. I wouldn't say that Fair Pocatello got a whole lot of bang for their buck. Now, I know that they spent a lot of bucks on some pretty high-powered people. Matter of fact, on high-powered groups, one of the groups, and I've told you about, the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force, huge group, the Human Rights Campaign, 1.5 million people in that group with a $50 million budget. There's this Hilltop Public Solutions. This is interesting because I didn't know that these folks had been involved in this. And let me just give you an idea of who these folks are. This is not a bunch of high school kids that are going out knocking on doors and asking if you'll vote for somebody. They do, among other things, coalition building. Building and managing third-party coalitions is a Hilltop specialty. The number of national state coalitions from the ground up to build a credible membership, become a stakeholder, and so on. When it comes to building our coalitions, Hilltop is successful, quality over quantity, and goes on. State affairs. These are different titles on their internet. You can go Hilltop Publications. You probably should go on the internet, take a look at them. You'll find out that these are not choir boys. These are not Boy Scouts. These folks are serious. They charge a lot of money, and they do very productive work. They certainly did a lot of productive work for Fair Pocatello. So they're interested in coalition building, state affairs. It says, though political events in Washington, D.C. may generate the most elite media coverage, today's more complex public affairs conflicts often take place off the national page in state houses and city halls. And Hilltop's bipartisan national network of seasoned operatives, if you look up their seasoned operatives, you'll find their seasoned operatives are people who work for people like John Edwards, Al Gore, all of them seeming to be on the left and the Democrat side. Whether it is state-level direct lobbying, local grasstops, intelligence gathering, or coalition building, Hilltop has done it and won. We've executed both multi-state campaigns for Fortune 500 companies and smaller single-state efforts for clients looking to pass individual bills. Our state partners can perform a number of functions. They can gather information, secure meetings, and represent you directly before state lawmakers. And it goes on. Then it tells what a grasstop campaign is. Hilltop's grasstops practice generates high-level local support positions. We engage in grasstop campaigns. Our grasstop campaigns apply quality pressure where it is best to engage in grasstops. A grasstop campaign. All right, now here's what it, if community and business leaders are your grasstop allies, then your individual members, customers, and employees are the grassroots. By themselves, their voices make it lost in government. However, when organized to speak out together, they can turn heads. And it goes on to tell how that works. Let's see, Hilltop's grassroots teams sit down with our clients and develop personalized strategies to garner attention. Our campaigns leverage the unique message of our clients' campaigns and the latest technology to get noticed in state capitals in Washington, D.C. and in Pocatello. Strategic communications. Whether you are on a political campaign or in the private sector, knowing how to effectively communicate your message is the first step towards victory. At Hilltop, we specialize in helping get your message out to your target audience using the latest communication tactics and techniques. And it goes over with over a decade of experience in campaign communications. In other words, folks, this was a big gun. And I suspect, I don't have the latest Sunshine Report. I will get it. I want to take a look at how much Hilltop Public Solutions was paid, but I suspect there was a big chunk of that $150,000 that the Fair Pocatello people spent. All right, let's see. What are we? We've got so much to talk about. Well, let's kind of move forward. I've got another little disc I want to show you. Kathy, I didn't give you much warning on this. Are you wound up on that second one that I'd like to show? Okay, just give me a thumbs up when you're ready to go on that. It's a very short one. And this kind of goes to part of why we, many of us, 4,800 people, felt that this ordinance was not a good idea. So we'll get to that in a minute. But while we're waiting to get that wound up, let me share a little bit about you. Now, one of the things that you've been hearing, or maybe you haven't heard a lot of it, and maybe you haven't seen a lot of it. I have. I have heard more than I will ever need to hear for the rest of my life about how hateful I am, how intolerant I am, how bigoted I am. Are you ready? Okay, let's take a quick look. This is very short. Take a look at this.
Gender rights in schools is trumping privacy rights. A boy in a Colorado high school who claims to be a transgender has been harassing girls in the bathroom. When parents complained, school officials said the boy's rights as a transgender trump their daughter's privacy rights. Some students were threatened with being kicked off athletic teams or charged with hate crimes if they continued to voice concerns. The Pacific Justice Institute sent a letter to the school warning against squelching privacy rights.
Baker standing by his controversial
Okay, so there you are. There's just a 30-second blurb on one of the many, many facets of this non-discrimination ordinance and where it's going or will go or can go from here. One of the reasons why many of us felt that this is bad law, it's a bad ordinance, and we wanted to do away with it. Now let me share some other things with you, and I'm going to read this one paragraph. I read it almost every week. It's important that that we keep this in mind, and then we're going to talk about transparency, love, hate. But let me just read this to you. This is a quote. "The greatest single victory of the gay movement over the past decade has been to shift the debate from behavior to identity, thus forcing opponents into a position where they can be seen as attacking the civil rights of homosexual citizens." And this is from this book that I've shown you many times, from The Homosexualization of America by homosexual activist Dennis Altman. And if you haven't purchased it yet, I've suggested this almost every week for months. I suggest that you go on the secondary market, don't buy it new, and buy The Homosexualization of America by homosexual activist Dennis Altman. So the idea then has been that shifting the opinion from us talking about homosexuals and homosexuality, the fact that men are having sex with other men, women are having sex with other women, we are not supposed to talk about that. And so we have little euphemisms, little benign things that we use like LGBTQ. Well, if it's just LGBTQ, that's just part of the alphabet. What could be all bad about that? You forget what it stands for. Lesbian, LG, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer. All right? Some people don't like to have those things pointed out. They want to keep it gay. Gay is a non-threatening word. It's very benign. It doesn't say homosexual. It says happy. Well, I guess that's part of why I'm considered so hateful, because I have the audacity or the temerity to point out what we're talking about. And what we're talking about is exactly what Dennis Altman was talking about in this book. This book is not new. It's been around for a while. I'm really talking about what Dennis Altman and many other homosexual activists are talking about. Well, let's take a look at what local homosexuals are talking about and their supporters, not everybody who opposes what I've been talking about is homosexual. There are many who are not homosexual but support the homosexual agenda. Whether they fully understand it or not, many of those who support the homosexual agenda do so because a family member of theirs is homosexual. I understand that. If you love somebody and they have a fault or they have something that is going to bring scrutiny or unwanted attention, however you wish to characterize it, I can see where you would be defensive of your child, of your sibling, of somebody else's child or sibling. I understand that. Contrary to what some in the community may think, I am able to have feelings, and I am able to understand why some people would maybe even be offended by the fact that I'm bringing out information that they would rather not have talked about. They'd rather not have it out in the public, even though I didn't bring it out. Remember now, this whole thing started, and let me just refresh your memory quickly, a little over 2 years ago when Susan Matsuura, when she was elected or appointed as the chairman of the Human Rights Commission or whatever it is here in town, she came up with an agenda that focused on quote-unquote civil rights for homosexuals or something like that. It started out as a resolution. The city council basically supported the resolution, but it was found out that a resolution didn't have any real teeth in it. They decided it needed to be a law, and we're really fast forwarding here. It became law, very bad law, because it does give special rights to a small group that is over and above the rights the rest of us enjoy for the very same protections that we all have. We've been through that before. So let me just share with you a couple of things. So here was a little, let's see, this came out, this was from Channel 6 on June the 19th. 1 week from Friday, the Idaho Attorney General's office will be in Pocatello to oversee a recount of May's Proposition 1 vote. The proposition was narrowly defeated by 80 votes. Thursday is the deadline for the groups in support of and against the initiative to report their campaign financing, so that's all been done. Now this is from KPVI's website, that's why I'm sharing it with you. Fair Pocatello was able to raise more than $155,000. The group spent about $150,000 on their campaign. Wow. This is Pocatello. We have 53,000 people roughly in this community. And yet this organization, small that it is, spent $150,000 to gain a victory for a law that we didn't need in the first place. Well, let's kind of take a look at some of the people involved in this. This is kind of a cutesy thing. You see here where it says, "Stop the hate." You can't, well, maybe you can. "Stop the hate" in large red letters. Well, this "Stop the Hate" is from Tom Nestor, owner of Hair Masters on Clark Avenue, right next to the Remax building. And Tom Nestor, never one to mince words, had, well, let's see, he says, let me just tell you what Tom Nestor says. "The hate for the LGBT community coming from Ralph Lillig and his group needs to stop. Everyone needs to call the mayor, city council, and ask why city funds are being used to produce such distaste, disgust, and hate on Channel 12. Really? And what is that hate, Mr. Nestor? Why Ralph has a special contract with Channel 12 and who can get copies of his Wednesday night live program?" Well, let me just tell you that, first of all, Tom, in case you weren't aware of it, this is public access television, and it's part of freedom of speech. And the reason that you can't get a copy of my program is because, number one, the station does not release anybody's programs, including you, if you had the guts to sit here and make your case instead of just throwing darts from the shadows, you would have that same right. You don't have to release, and the station does not release without your express written permission. Well, they'll take your verbal permission if they know you. They will not release your show to anybody else. So why don't you get off your fat apathy and come down here and put your own program on? And then somebody can take a few shots at you and call you names. "Oh, I'm sorry, you wouldn't like that, would you? That would be hate if they called you a name, wouldn't it?" Well, and it wouldn't be transparent. Well, yeah, I guess it would. And also, I might add in there that my programs are copyrighted. So even if the station were wanting to give you my program, they can't. It's a copyrighted piece that you can't reproduce without my express written permission. That's why, Tom. That's why in public access TV, that's why it works like that. And it works for everybody like that, even you if you wanted to do that. So there's no special contract. This is public television. That's right. You did know that. Good for you. Let's get a petition and require signatures to have Ralph Lillig's show pulled. Really? Now, why would you want to have my show pulled, Tom? Is it that you don't like this information coming out? Do you not like people talking about it? You know, I only share stuff that is already written by homosexual activists like this. Or here's one. This is not by an activist. This is by a minister. It's called "When the Wicked Sees a City." This one is written by two homosexual activists, Marshall Kirk and Hunter Madsen, after the ball. These are not my words, Tom. These are theirs. And I'm telling you what they say. But I digress. Let me move on. So, and then I'm not quite sure what these names are on here for. Oh, these are people who, I guess, are with him on this. Maria Wieg. Now, she's from that big Hilltop organization I told you about. Carmen Stanger, Stephen Wieg, Stephen Martin, Gretchen Vanek, Johnny LJP, Misty Tolman, Larry Gebhardt, Leslie Larson, Susie Matsura, Jessica Milford, Nancy Greco, Kara Lee Jacks, Casey Wynn, Seraphin Idaho, Virgie Arambari, Rose Eldenmeyer, Brenda, I don't even have that. So, now, let me ask you, Tom, to define for me your version of what does hate mean. If hate means telling the truth, if hate means bringing information to the public about something that's happening in their backyard, then I guess I'd be guilty, because that's what I do. I bring information, maybe information that you don't like being out there, but I bring information. Is that hate, Tom? All right, and then on the same thing, see Heidi. Oh yeah, and then Rose Ida Miller, Brenda Baumgartner Stanley, and Heidi Vandam, LMTLE, whatever that is. They all shared Tom's sentiments, I guess. 27 people like that. Now, here's an interesting thing. Somebody named Hans Hanevier, I guess it's pronounced. He says, "You know what? F Ralph Lillig. F this too. No censorship." Good for you, Hans. There are things that are being said about me that I would rather people don't, but they have every right to say them, I guess, ugly or otherwise, like Tom Nestor. And I'll show you a little more of what he shares with people. Sophia Manolis, The more love we put out there, the less hate has the chance to grow. That's true. I would like to see Tom Nestor and a lot of these people's definition of love. It doesn't necessarily go with the definition I have, I guess. Hans Hanevier again says, now that's a position I can support, Sophia. So Hans, my hat is off to you. You obviously understand no censorship. I'm all for it. Carol Bodley says, but love like irony is lost on nuts like him. I guess she's talking about me. And then Sophia Manila says, love plus love equals love. So simple. I'm not really sure what that means, but that's an interesting equation. I'll go with that, I guess. Carol Bodley says, some folks say if you don't like it, don't listen. Problem is, those who do listen are frightened enough to sometimes act. Fire up the typewriter, I'll sign. It would have to be something big for the mayor to notice. Okay. Johnny, I've never seen a name like Johnny LJS, capital LJS, capital P. The issue here is the special contract on public access station to where the public has no access to the records of his show. Well, maybe I've explained that, and maybe Johnny, strange last name here, maybe Johnny, now you understand it's because they don't let anybody have information from this. They protect everybody who has a show here, and mine's copyrighted, so they have to protect it anyway. Leslie Larson says, now I don't know these people. Never heard of them. The names are all new to me. Leslie Larson says, I'll be calling as well. Please let me know what I can do to help stop this nonsense. I'll picket. I'll march. Okay, Leslie. Carol Bodley says, see, just one more private Idaho for some folk, meaning some folks don't have to follow rules, especially if no one knows. I have no idea what that was supposed to mean. What rules is she talking about? I don't know. Then Hanevier says again, then that should be the issue, not censorship. Kudos, Mr. Hanevier. Sue the city and force disclosure. Sue them for what? They're not doing anything suable, liable. There's no liability attached to what they're doing. This is a public access television, and every one of these people whose names appear on these various emails could come on here and would be welcomed to have your own program, any one of you. You could have a group program, you could have a circus, it doesn't matter. This station is public access. It is paid for through the cable fees that we all pay, a little bit of tax dollars, not much, not by considering how much is thrown away on other things. Every one of you watching could have a television program, and if you spot check the programming on television here periodically, besides just watching me and throwing darts at my program, watch some of the other. There's some good programs on here, informative. Some of them are just people having fun. You can do the same thing. You could come in here and you could explain to everybody why your position is the right one. You can go ahead and tell them why mine is wrong. You're doing that anyway, but you're doing it from the safety of the shadows. Have the guts to come on here. Have your own program. All right, let's go on. Let's see, Carol Bodley, would there be a loophole for carrying hate programs in public area? Here again, the homosexual community loves to throw out this word hate. I've never seen it defined by them. Is it anything that they don't agree with? Is that what hate is? Because I've said nothing hateful. I've never called anybody a name. I've never cast aspersions at anybody. I have simply stated truth. And oftentimes, if not most of the time, from publications written by homosexual people. People who must know the community better than I do. Then there's somebody named MCM, spelled out, SEAEM. Just because Cable One has to pay fees and set aside the channel doesn't mean they have to actually broadcast the garbage Lillig produces. Just saying, hey, MCM, that's a clever name. Why don't you come on here and have your own program? Let's see what you have to say other than there. All right. Fair Pocatello, June 27th. Breaking, I guess this is breaking news. Bannock County election staff has finished counting all the ballots for the Prop 1 recount, and the results of the May 20th election stand. The non-discrimination ordinance that protects all Pocatelloans from discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity remains on the books. How does that protect me? I don't have a gender identity problem or whatever. So how does this ordinance protect me? We would like to thank Robert Pilecki, the Bannock County Clerk, and the county election staff for their diligence and transparency during this process. I'd like to see a definition of transparency sometime coming from the homosexual community also. We would also like to thank representatives from the Attorney General and Secretary of State for ensuring this recount was conducted in a fair and impartial manner. Thanks to all of you who have helped keep Pocatello fair. Then there's some comments under here. One is by somebody named Smitty Faure, I guess, F-A-U-R-E. Thank you, Mr. Lillig, for wasting the taxpayers' time and money. Well, Mr. Faure, the people in the elections office work Monday through Thursday. I don't think Friday's a regular day. And they didn't work for nothing. The tax dollars that you and I pay every day supported their regular work day, and we paid another $3,900 on top of that for the recount, which was about a 5 or 6 hour product. So wasting taxpayers' money. Now let me ask you, is transparency in government, is accountability in government ever wasted, Mr. Faure, whatever your name is? Rose Ida Miller feels like Lillig needs to move. I already did, I came here. Oh, I know, I shouldn't have said that. That's probably pretty upsetting. Gretchen Fowler Anderson says, perhaps some individuals should move back to California. Well, you're welcome to go. You might like it there. Chris Adams, Lillig, the man that thinks more about gay sex more than gay people do. that was, I don't think about gay sex, Mr. Adams. I think about homosexuals when they attack me, but I try not to think about gay sex. Jacob Anderson, Lillig is so pathetic. Let me guess what he will, I can't talk about this also. Jeannie Hebden, will they finally accept this or sue everyone in Pocatello? What a waste of time and money. Actually, Jeannie Hebden, nobody's being sued. We're not planning to sue anybody. Zachary Paris, they're just sore losers. Zachary, that name Zachary Paris sure is familiar. Jim Allen, now I don't know, I was told Jim Allen used to be the coroner here. I know none of these people. I wouldn't, if I ran over them in the parking lot, I wouldn't know who they were. Ralph Lillig, get the blank out of Pocatello. We don't need your presence here any longer. Pocatello is a great city and we don't want hate, bullying, and racism. Well, I got news for Big Jim, I don't either. And I'm sure getting tired of the hate, bullying, and racism, fanaticism, uglyism, whatever you want to call it, coming from the homosexual community. Really tired. But I would ask you to define. Come on, start your own program here, Mr. Jim Allen, and define hate, bullying, racism. Anyway, he doesn't want to mucking up this community. Everyone should be treated with respect. Yeah, really, Jim? Me too? Whoa, that's the true Pocatello, so happy about this recount. That's the same kind of respect being shown to my family and me, is that right, Jim? All right, define respect, Jim. All right, this is Pocatello Pride 14 by Chris Cole, and this was June 28th. Pocatello held its 2014 Pocatello Pride Celebration Saturday. Guest speakers discussed a variety of topics, including organizations for all lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender folks in the community, personal stories from parents whose children have taken their own lives after being bullied for being gay, and the reasons why Pride events are held across the nation each year, the Stonewall Riots. Stonewall Riots happened in 1969, I think it was in New York, and apparently, and I don't know all the, I haven't read all of this stuff, maybe I should read it just to get caught up on it, but supposedly New York City police officers were doing raids on, I guess, homosexual nightclubs or whatever, and somebody got the idea that he wasn't going to take it, threw a brick at a police officer, and from that point on the mustard hit the propeller and turned into a full-blown riot at some time. And I just vaguely remember reading about that years ago. But this is one of the cause celebs that the homosexual community uses. You know, any movement has to have something to identify with. So the homosexual community identifies with the Stonewall Riots. That's their civil rights. That's their march on Selma. And that's what they use. So that's what he's talking about. The Stonewall Riots were a series of riots that began on June 28, 1969. LGBT people and drag queens at the Stonewall Inn in New York City felt they were being mistreated by police officers and fought back. Be interested to know what that was all about. Quote, "We're trying to make our voices be heard all the time," said Casey Wynn, aka Spike Naugahyde, a drag queen performing at the Pocatello Pride event. "Recently we've done it, non-discrimination ordinance, and our voices were heard." Pocatello Pride also gives out awards every year. This is from Chris Cole at Channel 8. At the celebration this year, the board gave Ralph Lillig, the man who opposed the non-discrimination ordinance, a pink brick as an award. They said they genuinely wanted to thank him for all the work he did that brought the Pocatello LGBT community closer together. Well, I thought you folks did that on your own, Chris, when you showed up at the City Hall after. Oh, and there's a snapshot from the internet of the pink brick. You can't, it's not really very clear here, but it is a brick It is pink in color, and I guess that's the natural one of those that comes out pink. The Pink Brick Award. I want to say thank you to our opponents for getting the GLBT community and our allies together to work as one unique group. This brick represents the strength we have working as one. And let's see, we have a list of the folks who signed the brick, I think. Let's see. Yeah, here we go. Okay, I'm not sure. Oh yeah, okay. List of signers of the Pink Brick from Tom Nestor's Facebook page. Tom, if you haven't gathered, is very active in the local community. Timeline photos, back to album, Tom's photos, Tom's timeline, Tom Nestor with Brenda Baumgartner-Stanley, James Ruckty, Jan Green, Nancy Greco, Amanda McKinley, L.D. Wolfley, Johnny Karkin, Casey Wynn, Carmen Stanger, Misty Tolman, Brian Larson, Sherry Atkins, Steve Martin, Darren Berry, Mikey M-Y-K-E-E Jones, Heidi Vandam, LMT, limited I guess, L.E., okay, Larry Gebhardt, Dan Henry. Interesting, Dan Henry is from Idaho Falls, a very active homosexual in the homosexual community there and here. He goes after me regularly on the internet. Sarah from Idaho, John Pearsall, Lynn Birkenhagen, Carolee Jacks, Linda Reichart, Leslie Larson, and Justin Charles Baumgartner. They all like this one. Now let me tell you about some of the people who have also, I'm not the only award winner on this thing. This goes back to 2002 when Dr. Laura Schlesinger got it, 2003 when President George W. Bush got it, 2004 U.S. Attorney General John Ashcroft, 2005 Senator Dianne Feinstein, I'm very surprised that she got the pink brick, 2006 Arnold Schwarzenegger, 2007 President George Bush, a second time, the only two-time recipient, 2008 Bill O'Reilly, 2009 Carrie Prejean, and with a runner-up of Archbishop George Niederauer, 2010 California State Senator Roy Ashburn, 2011 Lou Engle, don't know who that is, 2012 Peter LaBarbera, he is active in a group called Americans for Truth About Homosexuality. You ought to look that site up, lots of information there. And then in June 2014, the Human Rights Campaign was nominated, HRC. These are the people that have given millions to homosexual causes, and they were noted. So this came from, among other things, this came from the Christopher Stephen, S-T-E-P-H-E-N site, also known as Chris Cole on Channel 8. He uses, that Stephen is his middle name. And he says, congratulations to me again. Thank you, Ralph, for time and time again showing us that we stand together. We can overcome any adversity. You're welcome, Chris. All right, so, and then, let's see, how much time do we have? We're running pretty close here. Then there was some other stuff on, I guess it was on his same Facebook site with others. And Dara Van Dolson, a brick? I hope it's not going to be thrown through his window. Christopher Stephen, also known as Chris Cole, we have to deliver it to him somehow. I don't think he meant for anybody to read that little remark, at least nobody that might care, like me. And then Cassandra Hunter says, Chris, whoa, dude, easy turbo. I have no idea what easy turbo means. Billy Johnson, can I use this picture for a blog I wrote about it? And it goes on, Billy Johnson has been fairly amicable. I mean, she doesn't like me. She's part of the community here, but she has not been what you'd call virulent for the most part in her attacks on me. Well, we're almost out of time, so I'm going to say thank you very much for joining me. We hope you will join us again next week. Have a most pleasant Independence Day celebration. Have a little barbecue. Enjoy your family. God bless you and yours. Come back next week. Good night.